3 of the 4 men left through the front door. The 4th couldn't. Whatever happened in those 60 seconds, it was enough. 4 men came through the door with a purpose, not browsing, not waiting. They knew exactly which chair they were walking to. The room felt it before anyone processed it. A barber's hand stopped. A customer found the wall. The afternoon light coming through the front glass suddenly felt wrong for the situation. The man in the second chair looked up from his magazine, set it down, and waited. The one in front spoke first, short, direct, the kind of words that don't leave room for negotiation. The man in the chair said nothing. His hands rested open on his knees. He didn't shift his weight, didn't look at the door, didn't look at the other 3 spreading slightly behind their leader. He found the face of the one in front and stayed there. The one in front spoke again, stepped closer. The man stood up. He was smaller than all 4 of them, lighter by every visible measure, the wrong person to be standing up right now. The one with the chain glanced at the others. A decision passed between them without words. Then the one in front reached out. The barber closed his eyes, and the next 60 seconds began. It was a Friday, August, the kind of San Francisco afternoon that can't decide between warm and cold, so it becomes both at once. Carlos had been cutting hair on Mission Street for 11 years. His shop was narrow. 2 chairs, a waiting bench, a radio that only picked up 2 stations clearly. He kept it clean. He kept it quiet. Regulars came on Fridays because Fridays were easy. Nobody was in a hurry. The afternoon light came through the front glass at a low angle, and the shop smelled like aftershave, and the particular kind of silence that settles into a place that has been doing the same thing for a long time. By 4:30 p.m., he had 3 customers. Marco, 19 years old, in the first chair getting his edges cleaned up before the weekend. He had been coming to Carlos since he was 14. He sat easy in the chair, one leg crossed, talking about nothing in particular while Carlos worked. Eddie behind the small register near the door, not a barber, just a man who handled appointments and kept the books for Carlos on Fridays. He had a paperback open on the counter that he read between customers and closed when someone came in. And the man in the second chair. He had come in around 4:15, sat down, said he just needed a trim, nothing complicated. He was small, maybe 5'7", 140 at most, quiet. He had picked something to read from the stack on the bench and settled in while Carlos finished with the customer before him. Eddie noticed him the way you notice someone who doesn't ask for attention. Just a man getting a haircut on a Friday afternoon. Nothing about him that made you look twice. That changed at 4:41. The door opened and 4 men walked in. Eddie saw them before he heard them. The way they moved spread slightly, not touching, each one covering a different part of the room's entrance. That wasn't how customers walked in. That was something practiced, something that had worked before in other rooms. Marco's hand gripped the armrest. Carlos stopped mid-cut, scissors open, comb in the other hand, frozen between 2 thoughts. Eddie's back found the counter before he decided to move. The 4 men moved toward the second chair. The man sitting there finished what he was reading, set it aside with one hand, then raised his eyes to the one in front, slowly the way you look up when you've reached a stopping point. Not because something interrupted you. He took in all 4 of them, then settled on the leader. The leader was maybe 6'2", heavy through the shoulders, a chain on his belt. He had the kind of face that had stopped being surprised by things a long time ago. The neighborhood called him Diablo, a name he had picked up at 17 and never corrected. Former amateur boxer, 23 fights, 19 wins. He moved the way men move when they know exactly what their body can do. Diablo pointed at the man in the second chair, said something low. The man didn't answer. Diablo said it again, slower the way you say something the second time when you want to make sure the other person understands the situation as only one direction. And Eddie, standing 8 feet away behind that register, recognized him. He recognized him the way you recognize someone when the context is wrong. A face that belongs in a different frame, a magazine, a poster, somewhere with better lighting and more space around it. And your brain spends a half second deciding whether to trust what it's seeing. He trusted it. The paperback on the counter was still open. He didn't close it. He didn't move. He just stood there with the understanding settling into him, while Diablo repeated himself and the man in the second chair still didn't answer. He leaned toward Carlos without turning his head, whispered a name, 2 syllables. Carlos heard it. Something changed in his grip on the scissors. He looked at the man in the second chair, really looked the way you look when you're checking something you've already been told, and then back at Diablo, and whatever calculation was running behind his eyes had no clean answer. He said nothing. The man in the second chair was ChuckNorris. He was in San Francisco for a meeting the following morning. He had stopped at Carlos's shop once on a previous visit, and on his way from the hotel he had come in again. A trim, nothing complicated. He He was supposed to be done by 5 o'clock. He had been through this neighborhood before, had stopped at Carlos's shop once on a previous visit, and on his way from the hotel he had come in again. A trim, nothing complicated. He was supposed to be done by 5 o'clock. He didn't look like what people expected when they heard the name. That was the problem. That had always been the problem. Diablo stepped closer. His crew fanned, 2 to the left, 1 staying near the door. The one near the door scanned Marco in the first chair, then Eddie, then settled on the wall like he was there to make sure nobody decided to use it. Diablo said something else. This time it wasn't directed at Chuck. It was directed at Marco, the 19-year-old in the first chair, the kid who had come in for his edges and found himself in the middle of something he had no part in. Diablo put one hand on Marco's shoulder, not hard, just present, the kind of weight that tells you it can become something else very quickly. He turned to Chuck, said, "You want to make a problem here? The problem doesn't stay with just you." Marco went completely still. His eyes went to the mirror and stayed there, watching everything in reflection, too afraid to look directly. Carlos's hand dropped to his side. Eddie did the math on the door, the one with the crew member standing in front of it, and looked back at the floor. Chuck took in Marco, the hand on his shoulder, the blocked exit. Then he turned back to Diablo. He asked one question, quiet, unhurried, the way you ask something when the answer doesn't change what you're about to do. "You've boxed before?" Diablo didn't answer. His crew exchanged a look behind him. Chuck nodded once, the small nod of a man who has heard the answer he expected. He stood up. He was shorter than Diablo by 5 inches, lighter by 60 pounds. He stood with his hands loose at his sides, weight distributed, and regarded Diablo the way a man regards a problem he has already solved, and is now simply waiting to finish. Diablo pulled something from inside his jacket. Short, heavy. He held it at his side, not raised, not threatening yet, just present, the way the hand on Marco's shoulder had been present. Carlos covered his face with one hand. Eddie stopped breathing. Marco stared into the mirror and watched everything unfold in the glass without turning around. Chuck glanced at the object in Diablo's hand once, briefly the way you check a clock, just confirming the time. Then his eyes came back up to Diablo's face and stayed there. "You can still walk out," he said. One sentence, no performance behind it, no raised voice, the way you say something when you mean it completely and have no interest in repeating it. Diablo laughed, genuine, short, from the chest. He looked back at his crew, and the laugh was answered, and then he turned back to Chuck, and what replaced the laugh was something harder and older. 4 years, dozens of rooms, nobody had ever made him use what was in his hand. The walk was enough, the numbers were enough. Nobody stayed standing. He reached out with his left hand and grabbed the front of Chuck's shirt. His right came off his hip immediately, a straight punch, the kind built from 23 fights of muscle memory, shoulder driving through, full weight committed, no hesitation, and no doubt. The space where Chuck had been was empty. The fist moved through air. All that weight, all that certainty, carried forward with nothing to stop it. Diablo stumbled into the space where a man was supposed to be, and before his feet could renegotiate with the floor, something intercepted what remained of his forward drive, and the tile came up to meet him. He hit the ground hard. The sound of it filled the shop. Carlos heard it before he saw it, that flat, heavy impact of a large man meeting the floor at speed. His head came up. His hand dropped. Marco's eyes went wide in the mirror. Diablo was down. It had taken less than 2 seconds. He was lower than Diablo, faster, angling in from Chuck's left. Not a punch, a rush, both arms opening for a tackle, trying to use weight and forward momentum rather than technique. He had watched the punch disappear and made an instant adjustment. He was smart enough to change the approach. It didn't help. Chuck stepped inside the reach, not away from it, into it, redirected the man's momentum sharply downward, and the floor came up to meet the second one faster than it had met the first. 2 men down in under 8 seconds. Marco was still in the first chair. He hadn't moved. His knuckles were white on the armrests. His eyes were tracking everything in the glass, the 4 men, the chair, the space between them, and when Diablo's punch moved through empty air and the floor came up, Marco flinched from the sound of it, even though the impact was 4 feet away. He watched the second man go. He watched the third man stop mid-step and take 2 steps back and leave. He watched the one near the door, the one who had been watching him, realize the calculus had changed and used the exit before anyone asked him to stay. And then Marco watched ChuckNorris sit back down in the mirror from 4 feet away. He was 19 years old, and he had grown up on Mission Street, and he had seen things that required him to be careful about what he said and where he said it. But he had not seen anything like those 8 seconds. He would think about them for years. Eddie would spend years trying to reconstruct those same 8 seconds and never be able to hold them in order. It was too fast for sequence. His brain had not recorded events. It had recorded a before and an after with something in between that defied reconstruction. The third crew member was mid-step when the second one hit the tile. He pulled his weight back, stood completely still. His hands came up slightly, not a threat, not a surrender, just stop, the body making a decision before the mind caught up. He looked at Diablo on the floor. He looked at the second man. He looked at Chuck. Chuck held his gaze for a moment, said something quiet, 2 sentences, low enough that only that man heard them. Whatever the words were, they landed. The man stepped backward twice, turned, and walked out through the front door without looking back. The one who had been near the door was already gone, had slipped out in the first seconds before anyone in the room processed what was happening. Carlos realized he was holding his breath. He let it out. Diablo was on his knees, pulling himself toward the door by degrees. His right hand was empty. At some point between the punch and the floor, whatever he had been holding had stopped being in his hand. He couldn't identify the moment. He reached the door frame, got himself upright against it, turned back. Chuck was already sitting down. He had his chance. Chuck said 6 words to no one in particular, just a fact placed into the room. Then he reached for what he had been reading, found his page and settled back into the chair. Carlos stood at the edge of the second chair. His scissors were still in his hand. He looked at them like he had forgotten what they were for. The shop was completely quiet. The door was still open from where the last one had left, afternoon air coming through it, that same Mission Street air, warm and cold at once, carrying the sound of traffic that had continued without interruption through the entire 60 seconds. The world outside had not noticed anything. Marco was still in the first chair. He hadn't moved. His knuckles had relaxed from white to something closer to normal, but he was staring at the mirror in front of him, like he wasn't sure yet whether to trust the reflection. Eddie had both hands flat on the counter. Carlos looked at the second chair. Chuck raised his eyes. "You weren't finished," he said. Not a request, a simple statement of an unfinished thing. Carlos looked at him for a moment, then he laughed. Once, involuntary, the kind that escapes before the mind approves it. He walked back to the second chair, he raised the scissors, he went back to work. Diablo sat in his car outside for 11 minutes. He knew because he checked the clock when he got in and again when he finally started the engine. His right hand was shaking. He made a fist, opened it. The shaking didn't stop. He had thrown that punch at 100%. He knew what 100% felt like, had built the last 4 years on what it represented, the absolute promise that if it came to it, he was the person in the room best equipped to finish things. The man in that barbershop had not been where the punch was going. He could not make that fit anywhere inside his understanding of himself. He had been sent to deliver a message. He had not been told who the man was. 3 days later, he found out. He received the name and sat with it and did not ask any follow-up questions, not because he didn't have them, because he understood that no answer would explain what had happened in those 2 seconds between the punch leaving his shoulder and the floor arriving. Some things you can be told about, some things you have to meet in person, and by the time you understand what you've met, it's already over. Diablo started the engine. He drove home. He did not go back to that block of Mission Street, not that week, not the week after. He told himself it was for other reasons. It wasn't. Eddie locked the register at 5:15. Carlos swept the floor. Marco had left quietly. Edges finished without saying much. Eddie stayed because he always stayed and because he didn't know how to leave without acknowledging what had happened. Carlos swept around the spot on the tile where Diablo had been. "You knew," Carlos said, not accusing, just saying. Eddie didn't answer right away. He had recognized Chuck at almost the exact moment Diablo's crew started spreading across the room. He had seen the face 2 months before. He had thought about saying something to Carlos, to Chuck himself, and the moment had closed before he moved. "I knew," Eddie said. Carlos leaned on the broom. "Why didn't you say anything?" Eddie thought about it. "Because I didn't think it would change anything," he said, "for either of them." Carlos looked at him for a moment, then he went back to sweeping. He had cut hair for 11 years. He had watched thousands of people from behind, how they sat, how they breathed, what their hands did when they thought nobody was paying attention. He had a simple theory built from all of that. What a person did in the 10 seconds after something extraordinary happened told you more about them than anything else ever could. He had never been more certain of it than he was that afternoon. Carlos finished sweeping. He turned off the radio. He locked the front door. He stood in the quiet shop for a moment before he turned off the lights. The story moved through the neighborhood the way those stories do. Without reports, without names attached, passed from one person to the next until the details shifted. The person who had sent Diablo heard a version of it within a week. He asked one question. When he received the answer, the name of the man in the second chair, he did not ask a second. He moved on. There are names that close conversations. That was one of them. The crew member who had stopped mid-step. The third one, the one Chuck said something quiet to before he walked out, left the neighborhood within 2 weeks. He had been in the crew for 3 years. He had a reputation, a territory, connections that took time to build. He left all of it. Nobody who knew him could explain it. Nobody asked him what Chuck had said to him in those 2 quiet sentences. Nobody was sure they wanted to know. Some doors, once opened, changed the room you were standing in. The third crew member had walked through one of those doors. Whatever was on the other side of it, whatever 2 sentences from a man in a barbershop chair had put there, was enough to make 3 years of his life feel like something he needed to step away from. He never said why. He never came back. Years later, when the name was known everywhere, in the way certain names stop belonging to a person and start belonging to something larger, Eddie Ruiz would think back to that Friday more than he expected to. Not because of the fight, he had almost not seen it. Too fast, over before his eyes had finished sending information to his brain. He thought about the question, "You've boxed before?" It didn't change the odds. Diablo hadn't answered. The answer hadn't mattered, but it had cost Diablo half a second. The half second of a man who received something he didn't expect and spent a moment deciding what to do with it. Eddie had watched his face in that pause. Something moved behind his eyes. Not fear, something earlier than fear. The first crack in the certainty of a man who had walked into 100 rooms and owned all of them. That crack was enough. Eddie had tried to explain this to people over the years and never quite landed it. He always ended up saying the same thing. He just knew that when it was over, when Carlos raised the scissors and the afternoon went quiet again, the room felt different, not safer, not calmer, settled. Diablo built his reputation on the certainty that every room he entered already belonged to him before he walked through the door. 4 years, dozens of rooms, it had always worked. That Friday it meant something it couldn't move. He understood that completely on the floor. Chuck Norris paid, nodded at Carlos, and walked out onto Mission Street. He turned left. The afternoon was still both warm and cold, unable to decide. He had a meeting in the morning, the thing every person in that room would carry forward. Carlos, Eddie, Marco in the first chair, was not what Chuck had done in those 60 seconds. It was what he had done before them, sat down, waited for a haircut, been entirely himself in a room that was about to require something extraordinary, and when the room required it, he delivered it, and then he went back to being exactly who he was. The haircut was good.